The NBA Finals are set after Kawhi Leonard led the Raptors to a Game 6 win over the Bucks Saturday night. 27 points, 17 boards, and a 6-point Toronto win to close out that series in 6 after losing the first 2 games. And let's talk a little bit about Kawhi, and let's talk about time management and load management. He's averaging nearly 39 minutes per game in these playoffs, and his regular season approach may very well have been a factor in helping him do it. He sat out 22 games. Missed is the one way to put it. He sat out 22 games, 15 of which were attributed to load management. Now, earlier this year, Commissioner Adam Silver addressed the idea of other players taking the Kawhi approach to the regular season.
I don't think other players are going to want to copy Kawhi because, remember, he missed almost the entire last season. So I view that very differently. That's not rest, load management, that's recovery. I mean, he was coming off, a very serious, again, almost full season injury. So that's something separate. But in terms of an 82-game season, I think there's nothing magical about that number. We've been playing 82 games since roughly the mid-60s. I think the bigger issue, putting aside the absolute length of the season, is there a better way, format-wise, to create a season? I think the issue is that in this day and age, you've got to keep people interested. You've got to keep people engaged. And it may be that if we're going to play a season that begins in mid-October and goes roughly till mid-June, there's a better way of composing the season as opposed to just shortening it.
So there are a lot of things that are on the table with that, but you will know, anyone who has been watching me or listening to me for years knows this is one of my biggest concerns with basketball. And here's what I have to acknowledge here. I think the fact that Kawhi played as little as he did this year, as few games as he did total this year, they managed his load as well as they did, was a factor in this series. Yeah. Look at his ability to guard Giannis on one side of the floor and still lead his team on the offensive side of the floor. That is hard to do, and if you were worn down by a long regular season, I see that being a concern. And so to me, this is terrible news, because if it works, I can't blame any team for doing it with their superstar, and that to me is very bad for the fans. So this to me is a challenge that Adam Silver and company will have to figure out how they're going to address, because I do believe that load management is going to become more and more prevalent. And I get that this was a unique circumstance, Kawhi coming off a serious injury, but still, this, I think, is something. And Tom, I think it's something that they need to really be concerned about.
Yeah, and I think Adam is addressing it, and he's also mentioned the possibility of going to a 75-game schedule. I think we've already seen him take steps in terms of reducing the back-to-backs, and I think that's a big factor. Yeah. I think when you look at the back-to-backs, a guy like Kawhi, he sat out a lot of those games, and I think it was smart on his behalf because he's coming back off of missing nearly an entire season. And I think each player you have to look at individually, but as far as every team is concerned in terms of load management, that's part of player care. So every team now employs sports scientists, athletic trainers, physical therapists, and you can look at your schedule when it comes out, and you have an idea when you're going to be hitting the heavy parts of the schedule. And then you're going to look at that and say, okay, we're not going to take a chance on risking injury with a guy who may be nicked up or a guy who has an injury history, and you're probably going to sit those guys out. And I would guess with all that was at stake for Toronto on both sides, Kawhi's side and the Toronto Raptors side, that Kawhi probably made the call most of the time as to when he was going to play and not play.
But to Greeny's point, DJ, this can't be good for the future of the NBA.
No, it's not, because stars drive the league, and we need the stars out there as much as possible. And from a coaching perspective, Tibbs, you can agree with this, is that if those guys out there are not out there, your possibility for winning goes way down, and it affects so many other things. So I think with Adam and what he did with taking down the back-to-backs, 4 games in 5 nights, doing away with some of those, is going to help going forward. And I just hope that, the stars of this league do not use this as a ploy going forward, load management.
I agree. And look, I give Adam Silver all the credit in the world. He has been a sensational commissioner, and in part because he gets out in front of these kinds of issues. And he's been talking about this. He was talking about it as early as I was talking about it or anybody else. He recognizes this is a concern. But the reality of it is, this is the one sport where the player's name goes above the marquee, right? This is like if you're going to Broadway to see some big movie star who's coming to do a play. Like, you're going to see that person. If you don't see them, it doesn't matter how good the play is. You're going to go home disappointed. And if you're the NBA and you go see a basketball game that features make up a team here. I mean, any team you want, the Milwaukee Bucks, and Giannis Antetokounmpo doesn't play. It could be triple overtime and end in 1 point. You're still going to go home disappointed, and that is what they have to figure out.
No, I think you're hitting on something big there, because it's not only the players, it's your TV partners. It's a lot that's driving the league, and then your fans. Your season ticket holders are paying to see these guys play, and then if someone doesn't play, that takes away from the product, it takes away from the league. So I think it's a big concern from all sides.